The Texas Deer Association presents this week's outdoor hero, Gary Olson from Lanesboro, Minnesota. All right, if you just joined us, welcome to the Alan Warren Outdoors Radio Show, where we spend 2 hours each Saturday talking about conservation and stewardship and hunting. You know, it seems we pick up new listeners every week, and surprisingly, a lot of them are women. They kind of, from what I hear, they like the angle that we take on presenting the outdoors. And this show is not really a catch 'em and kill 'em kind of a radio show. We take a little bit of a different approach to that. We talk about the importance of people becoming stewards, the best stewards they can possibly be, and hopefully communicating with those who do not hunt and do not understand what part that hunting actually does play in conservation. So to help us help communicate that message, we recognize what we call outdoor heroes. Now, these are folks that they walk the walk and they talk the talk when it comes to caring for animals and for the land. This morning's outdoor hero is all the way up in Minnesota, and we've had him on the show before a couple of months ago. I want to welcome our friend Gary Olson to the program. How are things in Minnesota this morning, Gary?
Cool and cloudy. We're in the 40s.
Oh, I'm jealous. It's going to be like the upper 80s down here in Texas today. So, hey, I know we visited a couple of months ago, and since then we picked up a lot of new stations, a lot of new listeners. Tell everybody what Gary Olson does with wildlife. What's your connection?
Well, I've been a crop and dairy farmer up here my whole life, and in the last 17 years, we've been pretty much just doing whitetail deer farming, and it's been real interesting. We're actually raising whitetail really gives you the understanding of the whitetail and more appreciation for them, and a little different take than what the wildlife agencies want to throw on us.
Why? And let me jump in real quick. Why did you change from being a dairy farmer to a quote-unquote a deer farmer?
Well, it's a lot less flavor. You know, dairy farming is pretty much, you're pretty much married to them cows. You're there all the time. And, deer farming gives me a little more opportunity to travel, and it's not like you have to be there all the time with them.
It would seem to me that deer would be a more fun animal to have to work with. I mean, they're so cool.
They are. They're a neat animal. And we have a lot of them around us in the wild, and it's just you get to understand the deer more once you actually raise them.
Now, when did you start? What year did you kind of get into the deer farming business?
1999.
Okay, so it's been quite a while. What kind of changes have you seen, Gary Olson? I mean, over the last 16, 17 years.
The genetics is just mind-blowing. What we have done genetically in these deer, unbelievable. When you're actually breeding the best to the best, I'm talking. We're treating these the same as we do our beef cattle. We're going out and picking our best buck, and we're picking out our best does, and we're actually cross-breeding them together and coming up with better animals. And after 5-6 generations, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. We're raising. This year, I got a 2-year-old deer that I scored the other day at right at 460 inches, an FCI score. And last year, as a yearling, he was 288.
Really?
Those kind of numbers just blow people away.
Now, these are not deer that you have taken or captured from the wild. These are actually... No. These are deer that we bought from other deer farmers in Pennsylvania, Ohio, around the country, Wisconsin. Deer farming's been around for, 30 years up here. Yeah, a long, long time. Well, what is it like? What's a typical day in the life of Gary Olson like, working with these beautiful animals?
Well, you go out and check them. Right now it's kind of a tough time because these bucks we're coming into rut up here, and you got to watch the fences. They like to start playing around. They rub on everything. It's just unbelievable. Anything loose, if there's a loose piece of metal or steel on the shed, they find that and make that noise. They think that is so cool. And they all got to pick on that till they tear it off. So, or if you put a post in the pen, it's unbelievable how they'll rub a post off, a bunch of bucks. They'll just all go to that same post, and just rub on it till it's the size of your little finger, and then they'll break it over.
I guess with those giant antlers like they've got, it doesn't take them very long. It's like taking a grinder to a post.
Yeah, and they've got so much power at that age right now. It's just the strength of those deer, a 200, 300-pound deer. You know, we've got bucks that are approaching. We're in the 300 to 400-pound range on some of our bigger bucks.
Yeah, first time I ever hunted up there in the North Country, you know, in the Michigan area and Wisconsin, I was stunned at the size. The bucks didn't look as big, their antlers, compared to down here in Texas. And it was because the bodies are so massive. They're like donkeys.
They're just huge. We have huge body sizes up here. We butcher a bunch of does every year. We've had does hang 110 pounds on the rail.
Wow.
Which would put you up, I'm sure it would put you up over 200, 220 live weights.
Yeah. Well, let's go from talking about deer to talking about your involvement with wildlife groups and with politics. And how did your evolution of being so involved with wildlife groups and staying dialed into politics, how did that take place?
Well, I was back in the 80s and 90s, I was importing cattle from Europe, and I got tied up in the BSC mad cow tracebacks from those countries, and we were under quarantine for 15 days. So I go way back into the BSC or the Prion thing, and when I got into the deer, then all of a sudden in the early 2000s, the CWD thing hit, and it just all kind of come together where I just saw a lot of discrepancies of what the people were saying about what this disease would do. I remember back in Europe, when I was in Europe, I remember some very prominent veterinary people saying that mad cow disease would change the face of the cattle industry as we knew it today.
Really?
And now I look back 20, 30 years later, and we don't even see, it's not even a blip on the mad cow disease, is it? Nobody even pays attention to it.
So do you think the same thing's going on with the diseases that some of these people are talking about that some deer have?
Well, I tell you, I'm really concerned. CWD is kind of they're crying wolf a lot on it. Boy, when you're looking at EHD kills going around the country, the blue tongue it's not proportional, the amount of deer that are dying to EHD every year. There's very few deer that die to CWD in the wild. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Okay, now for most of our listeners, Gary, most of our listeners don't understand these acronyms. What is EHD and what is blue tongue, for example? It's a virus. It's the way I understand it. It's a virus that I understand it comes from the cattle. That cattle will carry the disease, and these little midges will bite the deer around the eyelids and in the soft tissue areas and actually transmit a virus to them. And they will literally hemorrhage to death in a matter of 3 days. They die that quick, and they dehydrate. They hemorrhage from the inside, and they hemorrhage to death. And this takes place, this EHD happens from Texas to Minnesota to Montana. It's wiped out entire herds.
Oh, it's just devastating in South Dakota. We very little in Minnesota for some reason, and I think it's because of the jet stream. But it gets into southern Wisconsin. Illinois, Indiana had it severely. I had friends in Indiana that got just wiped out this year from it.
Yeah, okay, listen, Gary, hang on. Folks, we're talking with Gary Olson all the way up in Minnesota. He is a dairy farmer turned deer and elk farmer, and he has got a real connection with wildlife, very in tune with what's happening in politics. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. This is Alan Warren Outdoors. Y'all stick around. All right, everybody, trick or treat. This is Halloween weekend here on Alan Warren Outdoors, and I'm trying to decide what I want to dress up as. I think I'm going to go as an old fat radio host in camouflage.
Let's go as your brother.
I'll go as my twin. There you go. Hey, on the line with us is our good friend from Minnesota. He is this hour's outdoor hero. He's as I say, a dairy farmer turned deer farmer, and he has a real connection with politics or with wildlife and an interest in politics. Gary, last time we spoke, you had an incredible theory on how Donald Trump might win the election. So I want to go from talking about deer to talking about politics. bring everybody up to speed with what that theory was and where we're at today on it, because I find it fascinating and very inspiring for me.
Well, the really silent majority, or the vote that's out there that nobody here is aware of, are the Amish. It's real simple. The Amish Mennonite community, the Amish, they don't vote. Over of course, the history, they don't vote. And we know they're very conservative. They're gun owners. They love hunting. They're pro-life. They believe in everything Hillary Clinton stands against, pretty much. So, it's a matter of getting them wound up. And
there's literally millions of Amish people up there where you are, in the Minnesota area, all the way to Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania's huge. The Amish vote could be the tipping block in a state like Pennsylvania. Seriously, and Ohio. It'd show up Ohio, and Pennsylvania seems to be, kind of running on Hillary's side. But boy, that's a state that could, they could absolutely switch Pennsylvania.
Well, and I have seen, literally, that's the reason why I called you, is because in the last week I've seen a couple of stories, one on ABC News, one on CNN, that says that the Amish people could very well make the decision on who becomes the next president. I've got them actually posted on my Facebook page, and I find that very uplifting, because I've been in the dumps for weeks, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know everybody asks. We're very, Minnesota understands, very blue state, and it's basically because of the metro Minneapolis-St. Paul area. The great, and that's the problem you're running into politics today is, look at even Illinois. If you took Chicago away, I could about guarantee you where the rest of Illinois would go. And same with Michigan and these states.
Absolutely. Hey, I have a question for you. Now, I know that you are very involved in different associations and all, but why would a guy from Minnesota, a deer farmer from Minnesota, be a member of the Texas Deer Association? And I know you are. What's the deal there?
Well, we support each other. I mean, they stand for everything we do, and they vice versa. We kind of need to stick together as farmers and breeders, and we're getting beat up on by a lot of people out there. I think you got another group starting up down there, some Texas Conservation Federation or something, I believe.
I haven't heard about that one. I just know that the TDA is fighting every single day to try to get the honest truth and try to dispel some of the misinformation that people are hearing, because there's a lot of it.
And now these other groups are really promoting fighting the privatization of wildlife. It's like, to them, it's a mortal sin to privatize wildlife. And I sit back and think, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with privatizing wildlife? You look at Africa. Privatization of wildlife in Africa saved the wildlife in Africa. Fencing and conservation. These conservation preserves or conservancies, and I think we got to look at it a little different angle. These government agencies that are so in tune of keeping wildlife wild, they're heavily funded by taxpayer dollars. Now just think about this. Where are them dollars going to be in the next 5-10 years with the deficits we're running? If they're totally depending on taxpayer money to save the wildlife, I think they're going down the wrong angle. I mean, what's wrong with privatization or private ownership of wildlife to save them?
Well, you had mentioned about Africa, South Africa in particular. If you study the history of South Africa, in your mind, the person that doesn't know any better, they have this fantasy that animals were everywhere. That's not true. But today, animals are everywhere. They've gone from like 600,000 total wild animals, they estimated 100 years ago, to now more than 18 million. And it's in large part due to private ownership of that wildlife. I don't see why they can't do that here in the United States.
Right. Isn't that something where Africa's ahead of us in that theory? It's just, to me, it's just mind-boggling. We've got a group of people that are so stuck in an old rut that they can't get out of it. They're pushing against our industries.
Well, and I think that unless we continue to keep the word, get the word out there with associations like the Texas Deer Association and the ones that you're involved in up there in Minnesota, we're going to keep losing the battle. So we got to stay in there and hang in the fight. All right, Gary, stick around. We got to take a quick break. We're going to come back, continue our talk. Folks, we've got Gary Olson on the line with us from the great state of Minnesota. He's a farmer. He's actually a deer and elk farmer. He's very up on politics, as you hear. And we're going to talk a little bit how government agencies are sort of overreaching and squashing private business. Y'all stick around. Gary and I'll be right back. All right, wake up, everybody. This is Alan Warren down in San Antonio, Texas. On the line with us is our outdoor hero this hour. He is Gary Olson. He's a deer farmer from the great state of Minnesota. And Gary, I want to talk a little bit and get your take on the government regulation and how that has changed for people in your industry over the last 16, 17 years since you've been a deer farmer.
Well, since 2002, it was been mandatory in Minnesota that we tested 100% for chronic wasting disease in our deer, and they're very strict with that. Everything's tested up here over 12 months old. And what baffles me is they hold us to one standard, but the wildlife agencies are a totally different standard. They don't think they hardly need to do any testing on their animals and to declare themselves free. But it's so funny that we were just 2 weeks ago. We were at North Carolina at the United States Animal Health Conference, and we did pass a resolution there, barely, that it was heavily fought by the wildlife groups, but it's going to require them for the relocation programs they're doing in elk all around the country, it's going to require them to do a live test and then plus their statistical probability studies on those areas that they're removing these animals from. But to me, it doesn't make sense that they're doing these relocation programs. The Minnesota wants to do one up in northern Minnesota, the northeast sector, but we had 150 elk farmers in Minnesota. Why don't they just go out and buy from elk farmers who have been testing for chronic wasting for 20 years and release them, and the money stays in Minnesota? They got better genetics. They got world-class genetics right off the bat in the wild.
You make entirely too much sense, Gary.
Well, the state of Missouri spent upwards of $27,000 per animal that's audited cost. That was an audited cost for the relocating per animal in their relocation. Wisconsin did theirs, and I understand they were up over about $30,000 per elk. You can buy an elk cow from a farmer for about $4,000. Now get this: you could buy 7 cows from a farm that's already tested and not have an issue of bringing CWD into the state. Yet they're still looking at relocating from states like Kentucky that are very lowly tested animals.
What's their explanation? That makes no sense at all. What is their explanation of it? Why do they do it that way?
Because these people are purists. They think that that these farmed animals are touched, they're poison, they're whatever. They're purists. They don't get it. They don't get it that these animals are raised at very high standards and have very high health protocols and are well cared for animals. And once they're released, they're wild animals. They go back into the wild and make a living on their own. Exactly. These guys don't get it. And here, when we required them at the United States Animal Health Conference, voted for this, to have USDA oversight with health protocols on these relocations, they fought us tooth and nail to the end in this full assembly to defeat it. Now, get this, they did not want oversight by USDA APHIS of any kind of protocols over them. Does that make sense to you?
But they want to put you under a microscope.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
They wanted no oversight over what they were doing.
Hey, give me real quick in a minute or so, what do you see as the one or two biggest challenges that you, as a deer farmer in the deer farming industry, elk farming industry faces?
Regulation probably is a huge one. States closing their borders for movement from farm deer that are highly tested animals. You're shutting that. They're trying to shut markets down. They're trying to bankrupt our industry. Is what they're trying to do.
What about our culture of fewer and fewer hunters? Are you guys? As elk farmers, deer farmers, are you concerned about literally fewer and fewer hunters, and the average age is going up?
Oh, sure. It's hunter. Hunter retention and hunter recruitment are two of your biggest, flaws, even on the wild side. It's a huge problem, and people don't have the time to go hunt. That's why people like to go to preserves, is they can actually go in and actually hunt an animal over a weekend and leave. And you get busy executives that are working, and their time is very valuable. They can't spend 3 weeks hunting. yeah, hunter recruitment, hunter retention are probably going to be the biggest problems with wildlife. And they got to start managing numbers. You look at the growth of wildlife has been exponential. In 1930s, we had about 300,000 white-tailed deer in the wild. Today, it's estimated over 32 million deer. That's 1,000 times increase.
There's a lot of venison out there, and it's healthier for you than the stuff you buy at the grocery store, and I think it purifies your soul to be in the outdoors. But
absolutely, it changes your attitude about
it sure does.
It's just relieving sitting out there and watching things and birds and whatever. And a lot of it is you don't even, I'm at the age where I watch deer walk by that are small, and that's kind of nice. You just don't even shoot, you just let them go,
I'm telling you, if you want to turn a hunter into a non-hunter with non-shooter, all you got to do is turn him into a deer farmer. You just love to just watch them. So,
yeah, hey, exactly.
Hey, Gary, I got to let you go, and I got to say a word for our friends over at the Texas Deer Association. But I appreciate you getting up early this morning, and I hope you'll send some of that cold Minnesota weather down our way.
Okay, well, I sure will. Thank you.
You take care. We'll talk again. That was Gary Olson. He's he used to be a dairy farmer. Now he's a deer and elk farmer. And I love his theory about the Amish may be the ones that actually push Donald Trump over the top. Wouldn't that be good? All right, before we hit the break, I want every single listener, I want to invite you, if you love deer, every one of you, to become a member of the Texas's fastest growing association of deer enthusiasts. Even folks like Gary Olson up in Minnesota are members of the TDA. You may say, why? Well, because the TDA fights for the rights of all deer hunters, for all deer lovers in the state of Texas. And I think that is pretty important. And the TDA has made a special membership available for our listeners for free. If you enjoy this show, if you like hearing stories from outdoor heroes like Gary Olson this hour and others that you meet every week, take a minute, add your name to the growing list of folks that support the Texas Deer Association. Now, when you sign up, you'll receive a good-looking window decal, a member's welcome packet, access to their online magazine, and my favorite, you'll get invitations to special events and meetings where you'll learn all about the country's #1 big game animal. So, to get your free membership to the Texas Deer Association, jump on the website. Go to huntyourway.com, huntyourway.com. Click on membership at the top of the page. Again, doesn't matter if you live in Texas or all the way up in Minnesota. If you love deer, we need you to join the TDA. That website again is huntyourway.com. All right, one more segment to go this hour. This is Alan Warren Outdoors. Why don't y'all chime in? Give us a shout, 855-296-7469, and nominate somebody that you think is an outdoor hero, 855-296-7469. But it's been a while since you heard that, huh?
Yes.
Especially on an outdoor radio show. All right, folks, this is Halloween weekend. The Halloween weekend edition of Alan Warren Outdoors. Before we wrap up the hour, I got to do a shout out for our friends at Four Canyons Ranch. If you're a landowner here in Texas, you want to improve the genetics of the white-tailed deer on your property, you need to visit with the folks at Four Canyons. For literally 20 years, almost 20 years, Four Canyons has helped Texas landowners quite literally turn an ordinary ranch into a ranch with fresh whitetail genetics, whatever kind of genetics you like, from gorgeous, traditional, typical whitetail bucks to enormous bucks. You've seen them in magazines that score so high. Four Canyons has got them all, and now is the time to visit with them about stocking your ranch with those beautiful genetics. If you're a Texas rancher, you want the fastest, most affordable way to improve the quality of the deer on your land, you get a hold of Four Canyons today. Nobody is any better at doing what they do. Go to fourcanyons.com. Spell it out, F-O-U-R, fourcanyons.com. They're an enthusiastic supporter also of the Texas Deer Association. All right, so with it being Halloween, what's your costume going to be, Tim?
I'm going as a radio personality.
I am too, an overweight one wearing camouflage.
I like that.
You know what Lisa's going as?
No, I don't.
Well, she's going to go as her normal self. She's got her broom. She'll be flying the neighborhood. So if you're out and you see this woman flying around on a broom with her witch hat,
My mother-in-law's in town?
No, it will be my wife, and she'll probably have one of the neighborhood kids, these little girls in the neighborhood. She'll be teaching them how to grow up and how to fly a broom and tell your husband what to do with it. So anyway. All right, we were speaking about Donald Trump, and if I can wrap this up, I was thinking about an analogy about what's going on when they talk about a rigged election. So I'm going to kind of give you Alan's take on this. If you were to go to Las Vegas, talk about Las Vegas, would you say that the casinos are rigged? Are they actually rigged?
No.
Right. The casinos are just what they are. They're not rigged. They don't have to be rigged. The games in the casino are so slanted in favor of the casino, they don't need to rig the games. I think it's kind of the same way in politics. Because of the media. The media is so slanted in favor of a liberal agenda, so slanted in favor of Hillary, they don't need to do anything else. I mean, picture this. The low information voter, the person that just doesn't know any better, really believes he's going to be the one that wins in that casino. They really believe it. And most of the time, almost all the time, they lose. They're thrown to the curb, and 4 years later, the casino goes, hey, come on back in. You believe in me. So anyway, is Donald Trump going to win? I don't know. I sure hope so. We'll know about a week from Tuesday, I guess. All right, let's see. Hour number 2 is next. We got some more hunts to sell for November at Great Texas Hunts. Go to greattexashunts.com. We're going to end this hour with more of the Monster Mash.
Tell them then you can monster mash and do my graveyard smash. You'll catch on in a flash.